He flew the American flag, so the HOA sent 4 men to scare him into silence. Chairman Marvin Drake thought money and power made him untouchable. But Jake Bowen was Delta Force, and he had a plan. Wait until you see how this battle ends. Justice hits harder than you'd think. When Jake Bowen bought the house in the quiet little neighborhood of Claremont, he wasn't looking for friends, or barbecues, or warm welcomes from smiling faces behind white picket fences. He wanted one thing, and one thing only: silence. The kind of silence that doesn't scream, that doesn't bleed, that doesn't smell like sand, sweat, cordite, and rot. He'd had 16 years in Delta Force to learn what noise costs: Fallujah, Mosul, Kandahar, missions that never made the news, briefings that disappeared before they were read, operations that didn't exist officially. His body carried the record, a web of scars, calluses, bone fractures that didn't heal right. His mind was worse, but quieter, controlled. That's what made him dangerous. He didn't come here to be dangerous. He came to plant a tree, grow tomatoes, drink his morning coffee without checking for sniper glint in the distance. No adrenaline, no perimeter checks. Just the breeze in the pines and the slow rhythm of a life that didn't require strategy. But conflict doesn't care what you want. It finds you. It was 3:07 a.m. when the knock came. Not a loud bang, not frantic, no talking. Just a quiet, deliberate series of taps against the wood, sharp, precise. 3 knocks. Pause. Then 2 more. Jake's eyes opened instantly, pupils adjusting in the dark. He'd been asleep, but only technically. Years of conditioning didn't allow full rest. Every noise was logged, categorized, weighed. This one was wrong, too calm, too practiced. He didn't move at first, just listened. No footsteps retreating, no car engine idling, no insects. That was the part that chilled him, the silence around the sound. The neighborhood had gone dead quiet. Even the crickets had stopped. He rose without turning on a light, movements measured, fluid, barefoot. He bypassed the foyer light switch. He didn't need it. The moon was full, casting enough silver through the curtains to silhouette the world. Through the peephole, nothing. No one stood directly at the door. He didn't open it yet. Instead, he moved left, quietly, past the doorframe to the living room window, drew the curtain 1 inch to the side. There they were. 4 men, spread out across the lawn in a staggered V formation. All standing still, no conversation, no visible communication, just waiting, watching. One of them, tall, broad-shouldered, held a crowbar down by his side like it wasn't the first time he'd held it. Another had a white plastic trash bag. Its shape and sag made Jake think of duct tape, gloves, maybe more. The third wore something bulky under his jacket and carried what looked like a stun baton clipped to his belt. The fourth, unarmed, maybe, or hiding something. Possibly backup, possibly the man in charge. No uniforms, no markings, civilian clothes in dark shades, coordinated but not matching. Tactical, but trying not to look it. That told Jake more than words ever could. He moved back to the door, no fear, just calculation. He unlocked it without sound, then opened it. Slowly. Deliberately. Just wide enough for his frame to fill the gap, his eyes unreadable in the dark. None of the men spoke. They didn't flinch, they just looked at him. Jake said nothing. He didn't need to. He'd seen this before. In Yemen, in South Sudan, in places with no streetlights and no laws after sunset. This wasn't a prank. It wasn't a misunderstanding, and it sure as hell wasn't about HOA regulations. It was an operation, and he was the target. But they had no idea who they were dealing with. The day before it all unraveled, Jake had been working in the yard. It was early afternoon. The sun bore down in long shafts of late summer heat, and sweat gathered at his collar as he planted a row of rosemary along the back fence. The scent reminded him of cleaner places, Mediterranean coastlines, not dry dust and diesel. He didn't hear the man walk up, but he knew he was there. The footsteps were soft, uncertain. Shoes that had never touched a battlefield. When Jake turned, the man was already at the edge of the lawn, buttoned-up polo shirt tucked into khakis, HOA badge swinging gently from a nylon lanyard around his neck. His smile was thin, rehearsed, and it didn't reach his eyes. He held a tri-fold pamphlet in one hand, bright blue cover, bold letters, Claremont Hills Homeowners Association, Community Guidelines and Compliance Expectations. Jake straightened slowly, wiped his hands on a rag, and waited. He wasn't in the mood for neighborly chats, but the man wasn't here for small talk. "Mr. Bowen?" the man asked. Jake nodded once. "That's me." The man extended the pamphlet, not quite handing it over, more like offering it as evidence. "I'm Marvin Drake. I'm the HOA chair for this block." Jake took the booklet without looking at it. "There's been some concerns," Marvin said, glancing toward the house, then back at Jake. "You're currently in violation of visual compliance standards." Jake raised an eyebrow. "The exterior," Marvin continued, "has been painted in a color that isn't on the approved palette. Federal clay is not sanctioned under Article 3.7 subsection B." Jake looked back at his house. Warm terracotta tones, subtle and solid, clean, American. Marvin cleared his throat. "And then there's the matter of the flag." Jake's eyes narrowed slightly. "What about it?" Marvin's lips twitched at the corners. "We've had reports that your flag display could be interpreted as aggressive. It's a disruption to neighborhood visual harmony." Jake didn't answer immediately. His gaze held steady. "It's the American flag," he said at last. Marvin gave a tight, polite smile. "We maintain a neutral aesthetic here in Claremont. No overt political statements. No symbols that might make other residents feel unsafe." Jake folded the pamphlet and slid it into his back pocket. "You've got 24 hours to bring your property into compliance," Marvin added. "After that, the board reserves the right to take corrective action." There was no anger in Jake's voice, just flat silence, like steel cooling. "I understand," he said. Marvin nodded once, as if pleased with himself. Then he turned and walked away without another word. No handshake, no goodbye. Jake watched him go. His posture, the way his shoulders moved, told him everything he needed to know. Marvin Drake wasn't just some clipboard-wielding bureaucrat. He was a man who enjoyed control, who believed in power enforced through polite policy. He didn't need to yell to be dangerous. He just needed rules, and people too tired to fight them. Jake had seen that kind before, in outposts and villages where uniforms didn't matter. The kind of man who'd never pull a trigger himself but would make damn sure someone else did, a middleman for small-scale tyranny. At the time, Jake didn't think too much of it. He'd dealt with HOA types before. He chalked it up to petty turf games and empty threats, just another little king on a suburban throne. But later that night, when 4 men stood on his lawn in silence, one with a crowbar, one with a bag, one strapped with tools not sold at hardware stores, Jake realized he'd made a mistake. This wasn't about paint, and it damn sure wasn't about a flag. This was something deeper, organized, intentional, and it had Marvin Drake's fingerprints all over it. Jake stood in the darkness, watching the silent silhouettes, and something in him that had been sleeping for a long, long time began to stir. They moved like they'd drilled it. No talking, no rushing, just a synchronized advance. 3 steps, pause, fan out. Not sloppy, not twitchy like kids with something to prove. These weren't panicked locals or random vandals. Their rhythm was tight. Shoulders low, weight balanced. Their formation covered angles, entry, retreat, flanks. Jake watched them from the doorway, motionless. They didn't speak, didn't need hand signals. They just moved as one, the way trained men move when they're not thinking, just executing. That's when it hit him. Not neighbors, not punks. Mercs, maybe, or ex-military. Private contractor types, the kind that lose the uniform but keep the hunger. One of them had done entries, room by room, probably overseas. Jake could tell by the way he kept his head tilted, left shoulder slightly higher than the right, a habit you don't pick up unless you've run real missions. You don't walk like that unless you've kicked in doors and cleared corners with a rifle at 12 inches from your cheek. He felt it in his spine. They were good, trained, confident, but they'd made one fatal mistake. They thought he wasn't. Jake stepped back slowly, drawing the door half shut behind him. His heel landed exactly where it needed to. A soft click echoed under the wood, barely audible. The floor beneath the threshold responded with a tiny pulse as the embedded sensor acknowledged him. No alarms, no voice prompts, just silence. The kind of silence you don't notice until it's too late. The house seemed to hold its breath. Then a deeper silence settled over everything, dense, loaded. The air changed. Every system in the house shifted from standby to live, passive to active. Not the kind of security system you buy from big box stores, but the kind you assemble over years. Parts from 6 countries, software from none you can trace. It didn't blink or chirp or flash LEDs. It just watched. Jake didn't need lights. The night was his element. He'd trained in darker places than this, under worse odds. He took a step backward into the hall, and in the same motion, his hand brushed the edge of the cabinet, thumb sliding under a panel, releasing a magnetic lock. It opened soundlessly. Inside, options. None of them friendly. He didn't reach in, not yet. He'd see how close they wanted to get. In the stillness, he heard the crunch of a boot press against the first stair of the porch. Heavy sole, confident, too confident. 1 heartbeat, 2. Another footstep. The third man was circling around the far side of the house. Jake could hear the soft scrape of nylon against stucco, probably checking for side access. Coordinated assault, standard practice, pin from the front, breach from the side or back. He'd used the tactic himself years ago. He also knew exactly how to break it. He turned, no wasted motion, and disappeared into the hallway, like breath into fog. Time, he whispered, his voice so low it barely existed. His pupils adjusted to the dark automatically. His breathing slowed, his limbs loosened. He wasn't nervous. He wasn't angry. He was clean. The part of him that lived in the civilian world, the part that planted rosemary and sipped black coffee, faded like an old photograph, curling at the edges. What remained was the part of Jake that knew how to kill 5 men with a chair leg and a belt. The part that never really left Mosul. His house was no longer a home. It was now a battlefield, a kill box, and they had just stepped inside it. The first one came in through the back, soft, quiet, like a rat testing the floorboards. He worked the door carefully, slow handle turn, no rush. Jake had expected that. He'd loosened the screws on the hinge earlier that week, left just enough friction to resist slightly. A pause, then a push. The man took a slow, deliberate step forward into the darkened kitchen. His foot found the glass Jake had scattered earlier, not shards, slivers. Window glass from an old pane, crushed and spread like seasoning just inside the threshold. Barely visible, even in daylight. Invisible now, but sharp, razor sharp. There was a pause, then the softest sound. A grunt. Then muffled profanity, hissed low and fast through clenched teeth. Pain makes men sloppy. The man shifted weight without thinking, and that's when Jake moved. One fluid motion from the corner, out of the shadows, his hand clamped around the man's wrist before the intruder could reset his footing. A twist. Not fast, just perfect. The bones in the forearm folded in the wrong direction with a low, wet pop. The body dropped. Jake caught it mid-fall and lowered it silently to the tile. 1 down. He didn't linger. The second one came through the basement, smarter entry, tactically sound. Most homeowners forget their basements even exist after dark. He pried the window open, slid in headfirst, landed light. This one had experience. No noise, no wasted movement. He'd likely been special forces, or trained by someone who had, but he didn't know the space. Jake had rigged the ceiling 2 hours earlier, fishing wire looped over the exposed joists, anchored to a bag the size of a gym duffel. Inside, a gallon of white paint, a dozen 3-inch galvanized nails, and a handful of scrap metal, balanced with care. The man stepped fully into the basement, sweeping left with a small tactical light. The motion triggered the wire. The bag fell. It didn't explode, it collapsed. The canvas burst as it hit the concrete. Paint bloomed outward in a slick halo, but the real damage came from above. Nails rained like sleet, jagged steel, bouncing, spinning, cutting. He screamed. It wasn't a shout. It was an uncontrolled, shocked, primal sound. Short, sharp, panicked. Jake didn't even flinch. That scream wasn't for him. That scream was a signal. Upstairs, the other 2 reacted instantly. The third man, the one with the crowbar, turned hard to his left, scanning the perimeter. The fourth drew a blade from inside his coat. fixed blade, serrated edge. He held it low, close to his hip, military grip. Jake moved. He stepped from the corridor soundlessly, pipe in hand. Copper, repurposed from the water main, weighted at the end with concrete epoxy. Nothing fancy, just effective. The one with the knife caught movement and turned, but Jake was already inside the arc. One step in, pivot on the rear foot, shoulder driving through the strike. The pipe hit the man's ribs with a flat, dull thud. Breath gone, legs folded. The other one turned to run. Too late. Jake caught him mid-step, one hand yanking him off balance by the collar. The man stumbled, tried to swing the crowbar, but Jake shoved his shoulder into the man's chest and brought the pipe down, fast and clean, across the forearm. The crowbar dropped. Jake pressed him to the wall, calm, no wasted words, just a whisper. "You picked the wrong house." He stepped back. The man slid to the floor, wheezing, broken and defeated. And then silence returned. Not peaceful, not empty. A silence that had weight, like it remembered the sounds that just happened and chose not to speak of them. Jake stood in the middle of it, pipe still in hand, eyes scanning the room. 3 down, 1 in the basement, still breathing. For now. By sunrise, the police had the call. The dispatcher logged it at 6:12 a.m. A male voice, tense but measured. 4 men injured, 1 unconscious. Backyard of 448 North Cypress Drive. The report came in anonymously, but the GPS traced it to a burner phone dumped outside the Claremont HOA Community Center. Within the hour, 2 cruisers rolled up to Jake Bowen's home, sirens off but lights flickering, cautious, curious. The scene they found was oddly quiet. Front lawn, undisturbed, mailbox upright, flags still flying. But in the backyard, EMTs were already loading 2 of the men into ambulances. One had a dislocated shoulder and a gash along the jawline. Another was sedated, his leg wrapped in a splint. The third sat upright with a broken wrist cradled in ice. The fourth refused treatment, nursing bruised ribs and muttering about unauthorized force. None of them wore uniforms, just dark tactical gear, civilian, unlabeled. Their IDs were all valid, each one licensed as a private security consultant. Their contracts issued by Claremont Hills HOA. By 9 a.m., Marvin Drake stood outside the HOA building, flanked by 2 board members and a nervous intern holding a clipboard. The local news van had arrived 15 minutes earlier, just in time to catch Marvin smoothing his hair and squaring his shoulders. He spoke into the camera like a seasoned politician, measured pauses, practiced concern. "We deeply regret the incident," he said, voice soft with rehearsed humility. "Our community has always prided itself on peace and order. Last night's events were, tragic. But let me be clear, our goal was simply to ensure compliance, nothing more." The reporter tilted her mic. "And what about the homeowner, Mr. Bowen?" Marvin gave a calculated sigh, looked briefly off camera as if pained. "Mr. Bowen has a history of aggression. He's unpredictable. We've received multiple complaints. He was warned repeatedly. But this response, it's excessive, borderline criminal." He smiled, small, polite, the kind of smile you wear when you're sure the game is already over. What Marvin didn't know, what he couldn't know, was that while he was speaking, while the cameras rolled and the headlines queued up, Jake Bowen had already turned the tables. Hours earlier, before dawn broke the horizon, Jake sat alone in his living room. No coffee, no lights, just a laptop open on the table and a drive humming quietly beside it. He hadn't slept. He hadn't needed to. The external hard drive had spent the night feeding on raw data, video pulled from every motion-triggered camera on his property, audio pulled from the directional mics mounted beneath the porch and eaves, infrared, time-stamped logs. Even the silent clips, 4 men pacing outside the house, mapping blind spots, were tagged and marked. But the crown jewel? A separate file, MP3, 1 hour before the attack, Marvin Drake's voice. He was speaking in low tones in a parking lot behind the HOA offices. Jake had boosted the audio. The microphones hadn't caught every word, but the essentials were crystal clear. "You go in quiet, no damage to the property, just enough to scare him. We need him gone by Monday." Another voice responded, one of the contractors, nervous. "And if he fights back?" "You've got gear," Marvin said. "Use it. He's ex-military, but he's just one guy. Keep it clean. No police, no noise." There was a pause, then Marvin again, flat, final. Cash only, no paper trail. Jake had clipped the file, time-stamped it, backed it up 3 times. One copy now sat inside a sealed envelope in his safe. Another was uploading to a secure legal Dropbox. He hadn't planned on war, but he knew how to win one. By the time Marvin finished his statement to the news, the detective assigned to the case was already reviewing the footage. 10 minutes later, a call was placed to the Claremont County District Attorney. Marvin Drake never saw it coming. He played his part like a man in control, giving interviews, answering emails, preparing to press charges against a violent extremist. But by noon, the headlines had changed. HOA chairman implicated in plot to intimidate veteran homeowner. And Marvin? He was still smiling, right up until the badge flashed in front of his face. The next morning, Jake walked into the police station at 8:03 a.m. No weapons, no sunglasses, no combat boots. Just a charcoal gray suit, pressed shirt, leather folder under one arm. He moved like a man with nothing to prove, calm, focused, unshaken. His only accessory was a matte black USB drive clipped to the corner of the folder, unmarked but heavy with meaning. The desk sergeant looked up and nodded. "Can I help you?" "I'd like to speak with Detective Marin regarding last night's incident on North Cypress Drive." "Name?" "Jake Bowen." The name made the man pause just briefly. Then he picked up the phone and buzzed someone upstairs. Jake waited without speaking. No pacing, no sighing, just stillness. 12 minutes later, he was in a private room with 2 detectives and an internal affairs liaison. The folder was opened, the drive was inserted, and the quiet hum of the playback began. First, the video. 4 men in dark clothing circling Jake's home. No police markings, no warrants, no hesitation. A tight formation, scanning corners, checking windows, tactical gloves, reinforced boots, body language that didn't match local security. Then came the audio, the conversation in the parking lot. Marvin Drake's voice, unmistakable, calm, calculated. "You go in quiet, no damage to the property, just enough to scare him." The room fell still. Jake didn't speak. He didn't need to. He let the audio speak for him. He let Marvin hang himself. After that, it didn't take long. 2 of the officers excused themselves from the room. One made a call. The tone changed. The room's formality shifted into something colder, heavier, legal. An hour later, Jake was asked to confirm his account in writing. He did so without hesitation. Clear, concise, factual, no embellishment. Just sequence, action, motive. By 11:17 a.m., one of the men from the prior night, the second intruder, the one from the basement, had been located and brought in for questioning. His injuries were minimal. His memory was not. He folded fast, said the job came from the HOA, said he'd never been told there'd be resistance, said they were just supposed to shake the guy up. When asked to clarify what that meant, he hesitated, then added under oath, "The guy who paid us, Marvin," he said, "do whatever you gotta do. Just make him want to leave." That was enough. At 12:48 p.m., a warrant was signed. At 1:06 p.m., 2 unmarked sedans pulled up outside the Claremont HOA office building, right in the middle of their regular board meeting. Marvin Drake, still wearing his HOA pin and still confident the situation was under control, was escorted out in handcuffs. His expression, caught on 3 separate phones and 1 news camera, was somewhere between disbelief and nausea. Conspiracy, coercion, attempted intimidation under color of civil authority. The charges were formalized by 3 p.m. bond hearings scheduled for the next morning. The story broke before the sun went down. Every local outlet had it on their homepage. One particular headline, printed in bold above the fold of the next day's paper, stood out. HOA chairman arrested in plot against decorated veteran. Below it, a still frame of Jake in uniform, years old, but sharp. The subhead ran, "Claremont community shaken as police uncover orchestrated attack by homeowner association leadership." Jake didn't comment. He declined interviews. He didn't post on social media. He didn't even answer calls from neighbors who had spent the last month avoiding eye contact with him on the street. He just sat on his porch that evening, coffee in hand, watching the flag above his door shift in the breeze. No more threats, no more shadows. And finally, no more Marvin. Jake never wanted recognition. He wasn't built for cameras or applause. His life had been made in shadows, quiet victories, unacknowledged sacrifices, names that were never spoken outside sealed rooms. The uniform had never been about glory. It was about discipline, about the men beside him, about doing the work no one else wanted to admit had to be done. When he'd left the military, he didn't throw a party. He didn't keep his medals on display. They stayed in a locked drawer next to old dog tags and a folded letter from a friend who never made it back from the borderlands outside Kabul. Jake didn't boast. He built a home, a garden, a routine, nothing else. So when the story broke, when his face made it onto the local news, when headlines used words like hero veteran and silent protector, he felt detached. Not proud, not angry, just quietly uneasy. But attention has a way of lingering, even when you close the door on it. It started with small things. A knock on the door one morning, too hesitant to be official. Jake opened it to find a neighbor, Angela, from 2 houses down. She held a casserole dish in both hands, her eyes darting anywhere but his. "I just wanted to say I'm sorry," she mumbled. "We didn't know what they were doing, and we should have—" She trailed off. He took the dish, nodded once. That was enough. The next day, a man from the corner lot left a box of fresh produce at Jake's gate, tomatoes, squash, a note folded neatly on top. "Thanks for protecting all of us. Didn't have the guts to say anything back then. I see it now." By the end of the week, there were 6 letters stacked in his mailbox, most unsigned, some typed, others handwritten in tight, nervous script. And then there was the envelope from the Claremont Veterans Council. Inside was a formal letter printed on embossed stationery. At the bottom, 8 signatures. One of them belonged to a man Jake had served with in Ramadi, retired now, but still active in the veteran advocacy circuit. The message was simple. "Men like you carry the weight so others don't have to. We see you. Thank you." Jake didn't respond. Not because he wasn't grateful, he just didn't know how to be seen without armor. Still, the moment that stood out most came without paper or apology. It was a phone call, unlisted number, secure line. Jake answered with a neutral yes, expecting a wrong number. Instead, the voice on the other end was clean, clipped, and unmistakably federal. "Mr. Bowen," the man said, "I'm calling on behalf of the Department of Homeland Security." Jake said nothing. "We're not here to investigate you. In fact, quite the opposite." A pause. Then the voice softened slightly, still professional, but personal. "We know who you are, and we know what you did was right." Another beat passed in silence. "Respect, sir. That's all I wanted to say." Jake didn't respond immediately. When he did, it was only a quiet, "understood." The line went dead. He stared at the phone for a moment, thumb resting on the edge of the screen, then set it down gently. There was no celebration, no triumph, just a kind of stillness that settled over him like the evening breeze on the porch. For the first time in weeks, maybe longer, he exhaled fully. It wasn't vindication he felt. It was something simpler, recognition, from the people who mattered, from the kind of men who didn't throw praise lightly, from a system that, just this once, had seen things clearly. And even though Jake didn't smile, not exactly, there was something in his eyes that hadn't been there before, a flicker of rest, earned, not given. A week later, Jake was back on the porch, same chair, same quiet street. The flag above him still moved with the wind, steady, proud, untouched. No knocks at the door, no suspicious cars idling across the road. No HOA letters slipped into his mailbox with vague threats dressed as guidelines. Just peace. It came not with fanfare, not with headlines, but in silence, in the way no one tried to take it anymore. The jasmine was blooming again. He could smell it, light, clean, soft. It mixed with the late evening breeze and drifted through the porch like something sacred. Somewhere across the street, a kid laughed, chasing a soccer ball. Jake didn't know their names, but the parents waved now, or nodded. It was subtle. Respect always was. He sat still, breathing it in. Not victory, not vindication. Just stillness. He hadn't fought for attention. He'd fought because someone had to. And now the balance had returned. Not perfect, not forever. But for now, the air was light, the house was whole, and no one questioned the flag anymore. That was enough. Justice didn't always arrive on time. Sometimes you had to drag it into the room and hold the door shut behind it. He knew that. And now, sitting with the weight finally gone from his chest, he could breathe. Not like a soldier waiting for the next move, but like a man who finally didn't need one.